You already know about the $9 billion. You've seen the empty buildings, the phantom daycares, the shell nonprofits collecting millions while providing nothing. But tonight, the fraud war in Minnesota just escalated to an entirely new level. The Trump administration declared an all-hands-on-deck action. DOJ is surging prosecutors. DHS is deploying assets, and Tom Homan just sent Tim Walz a message he will never forget. If Democrats think this is bad now, well, they better get some counseling, because what is coming next will make today look like a warm-up. Now, here's what just happened. Listen carefully. The White House confirmed this is no longer a routine investigation. This is a full-scale federal assault on corruption networks that have been politically protected for years. Officials warn that Minnesota is only the beginning. Any state where similar schemes exist is next. See, we already knew the scale. $9 billion over 5 years. That's according to federal prosecutors. Numbers even going bigger than that. President Trump saying $19 billion. We all know it's the tip of the iceberg. But now the crackdown is going operational. Secretary Noem revealed that state employees repeatedly warned Governor Walz that taxpayer money was being funneled into fake nonprofits and fraudulent businesses. They told him directly. And what did he do? He ignored them. House Oversight Chairman James Comer said that the breadth and depth of this fraud is breathtaking and warned this may only be the tip of the iceberg extending far beyond Minnesota. We've already talked about California. We've talked about other states like Illinois, Ohio. You see, what happened in Minnesota has basically broken the dam. And now it is going to cascade all across this country. And we are going to learn that the scale of fraud and the pilfering of the United States taxpayer and the U.S. Treasury is beyond any scale that any comprehension can even understand. And of course, the political class is freaking out because the crackdown does not just expose criminals, it exposes the infrastructure that protected them. $9 billion stolen. 19. It's going to probably be 100 million or more, 100 billion by the time we're done. All while politicians looked away. You see, when you see fraud on this scale, when you realize the system meant to protect you was riddled with corruption, you understand why self-reliance matters. And that's why I trust My Patriot Supply, because right now you can save $100 on the 3-month emergency food kit. Over 2,000 calories a day for 90 days. Real meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, and snacks packed in sturdy buckets that last 25 years. Made in the USA, no MSG, no junk, fast free shipping, 30-day returns, and a disaster replacement guarantee. When the systems fail, your family stays fed. Go to preparewithgary.com right now. That's preparewithgary.com. Get prepared and get peace of mind. And of course, now tonight, there is even more. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison is facing renewed scrutiny after a 2021 audio recording has resurfaced. In that recording, Ellison vowed support for a group that included now convicted fraud defendants tied to these very same networks. Meanwhile, CMS Administrator Dr. Oz announced a full audit and deferral of Medicaid payments in Minnesota. He personally notified Governor Walz. Tom Homan's message to Walz couldn't be clearer. You say you're not going anywhere? Well, neither am I. And neither is President Trump. Neither is AG Bondi, and neither is Secretary Noem, because the net is tightening. DOJ is surging prosecutors, and severe consequences are coming. Here's Dr. Oz. This just came out. Dropping the hammer on Tim Walz, announces that HHS will begin auditing Minnesota's Medicaid program. He starts that this is something that we have to present, an unfortunate announcement for the Walz administration. Listen carefully. This is where it begins. This is where it starts. Because the audit will reveal where it all went. And then the dam will burst. You're witnessing history on your screen right now.
At CMS and HHS, we're increasingly worried about the deep rot within Minnesota's Medicaid and social services system, which are supposed to protect the most vulnerable Americans. The more we uncover, the more it becomes clear it's much worse than we were led to believe by state government officials. We had previously learned that illegal immigrants were still getting care within allegedly state-only Medicaid programs that were actually using federal taxpayer funds. And because of that, we already withheld $1.3 billion from California, Illinois, and yes, Minnesota, which always seems to show up on the list of states with the worst fraud, waste, and abuse. But this is only the tip of the iceberg for Minnesota. We have an unfortunate announcement for the Walz administration. They have to admit they were warned. Last month, we instructed the Walz administration to produce a corrective action plan by the end of the year, which we received late New Year's Eve and found deeply insufficient. We don't want to hear, for example, that your state law doesn't allow you to protect federal taxpayers from Somali fraud. And we want a sense of urgency to fix this, as well as clear milestones to hold Minnesota accountable on progress. Enough is enough. I just notified Governor Walz we will begin auditing Medicaid receipts and defer paying on claims based on fraud, waste, and abuse. Until we can verify what is legitimate, we're going to defer payments for the 14 programs that the state itself identified as rife with fraud. That figure could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. If the state cannot get a handle on this fraud, as we find more, we intend to withhold more payments moving forward until the state cleans up its act. This ensures that Minnesotans who are truly in need and eligible for benefits can access Medicaid services, but the state's going to be forced to clean up its act and stop wasting taxpayer dollars. The state mismanaged its program, and federal taxpayers should not be held liable. We should note that Governor Walz has a rainy day fund with plenty of money to cover any real shortfalls in the unlikely event these actions affect beneficiaries directly. This, my friends, is about holding Governor Walz accountable and making him take the steps he should have taken years ago. This is just the beginning. While there are 14 Medicaid programs that we know are high risk, we suspect from our team on the ground that there's a long road ahead to clean up the fraud. We want the people of Minnesota to know that this hardship was caused by a complete abdication of duties by the Walz administration, which your state leaders need to own and address immediately. Our duty is to provide the highest quality health care for the most vulnerable Americans, so we can't allow further theft of federal taxpayer money from 49 states to underwrite fraud in Minnesota. We'll have more to say in the weeks ahead.
Holy cow. The hammer is dropping. Let's go to the press secretary earlier today discussing this all hands on deck effort by the Trump administration to crack down on fraud in Minnesota. It won't just be Minnesota. It will be any state across this country where fraud has taken place. So all options are on the table. Every state in the union is now in the crosshairs because of Governor Walz and Ilhan Omar. Think about that. Remember, Ilhan Omar wrote the bill that created this entire mechanism to exist. Governor Walz looked the other way. Money flowed. Kickbacks were, I'm sure, made. Backroom deals. Pandering to voting blocs. Keep them in office. Will look the other way. Keep the money flowing. Well, because of their greed, because of their actions, now every state is under the microscope. All hands on deck. Let's go to the White House.
Minnesota to date, the Department of Justice has charged 98 total defendants in several Medicaid fraud and related case programs. 64 were convicted, and 85 of the 98 charged were of Somali descent. The DOJ has also issued over 1,700 subpoenas, executed over 130 search warrants, and they have now added more attorneys to their office there to absorb the case flow. DHS is on the ground going door to door conducting large-scale criminal and HSI investigations. They have also sent approximately 2,000 agents to Minneapolis to assist with law enforcement and immigration enforcement. As I said, Secretary Noem was on the ground yesterday. The Department of Health and Human Services has also begun requiring a justification and photo evidence for all child care related payments nationwide, and they required Minnesota to conduct a full audit of all child care centers. They also froze $185 million in funding to Minnesota. And Dr. Oz, who was just here, also notified Governor Walz they're going to begin auditing Medicaid recipients and deferring payments on claims based on waste, fraud, and abuse. The Department of Labor is also conducting a targeted review of Minnesota's unemployment program. Department of Agriculture requiring Minnesota to conduct recertification for SNAP recipients, and HUD has launched investigations into the public housing. SBA has also suspended nearly 7,000 borrowers amid suspected fraudulent activity. So, with all of that, rest assured, this is an all-hands-on-deck effort from the entire administration to get to the bottom of this and to ensure that the ripping off of taxpayers in the state of Minnesota, and it won't just be Minnesota, it'll be any state across this country where fraud has taken place, and we are protecting law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens.
God
To date,
bless America. God bless President Trump. The dam is breaking. 10 hours ago, Rapid Response posting, Minnesota State Rep Walter Hudson, U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson estimates that the total amount of criminal fraud over 5 years may reach $9 billion. Now, of course, we've heard other numbers. President Trump, $19 billion. California, I think, will be here, $240 billion. This while Governor Tim Walz and other stakeholders dispute that assessment. You say the point that I wish to emphasize is whatever the actual number is, the full scope of the problem is not just criminal fraud, but a culture of profiting from government programs in perpetuity. This is the Honorable Walter Hudson, Minnesota State Representative.
Deputy U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, serving the District of Minnesota, has said that he could keep 1,000 prosecutors busy. But he's limited to a mere 25, only 5 of which are tasked with building fraud cases. He estimates that the total amount of criminal fraud over 5 years may reach $9 billion, which is fully 1/2 of the money that has been directed to these programs by the state. While Governor Tim Walz and other stakeholders dispute that assessment, the point I wish to emphasize is this. Whatever the actual number is, the full scope of the problem is not just criminal fraud, but a culture of profiting from government programs in perpetuity, not as a safety net, but as an industry. I've personally met and had discussions with folks who identify themselves as consultants for multiple entities accepting government benefits. They have made a career out of showing people how to leverage the gaps in government oversight to maximize benefit payments. Deputy U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson serving the...
Exploiting gaps. Well, I think there'd be a little bit more than gaps in Minnesota. Secretary Kristi Noem, 24 hours ago, if you think you can come to this country and get rich defrauding the American people, think again. She says, we will root out every case of fraud we find from Minneapolis to California to New York. Americans deserve justice, answers, and accountability, and under President Trump, we will deliver just that. If you can't play by the rules, you can't stay in our great country, period. So it sounds like mass deportations are on the table for all these fraudsters as well. And they should start with Ilhan Omar.
More than 9.
Are you aware of the crimes you've committed?
That's Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who deployed roughly 2,000 agents to the Twin Cities to conduct immigration raids and to assist in a widening fraud probe. 2,000 agents is enormous.
It is.
How do you justify that to the American taxpayer?
I'll answer that. How do you justify it? Because there's $19 billion in fraud they've got to find. So you need an all-hands-on-deck approach. That's why you need 2,000. Let's hear what she has to say.
American taxpayer is grateful that that resource allocation has been put here. We've never seen this kind of fraudulent and abuse of programs before in recent history.
Over the past 3 years, prosecutors here have charged more than 90 people, mostly Somali Americans, with fraud.
Are you aware of the crimes you've committed?
Yeah. You see, I told you. It's because that's how you justify it. GOP majority whip. Good riddance to Governor Walz. But he cannot escape accountability for the estimated $9 billion in fraud. Where the hell was the Twin Cities media been? They've had this story for years. Thank God for POTUS for finally bringing attention to the issue. Well, I'll tell you why the media never reported on it. Because they were probably in on the take too. You see, you have to have the guys at the top pointing the cameras in another direction so that you're not putting the spotlight on the fraud. No matter what people say, no matter how many whistleblowers come forward. That's how you keep the game going. You control the messaging, you control the investigation, and you control the fraud. And if you don't have the media looking at the fraud, then nothing's going to change. Nick Shirley did that with his cell phone. And the whole thing is unraveling before America because the media looked the other way. Now, my question is, who made those decisions? Who made those editorial calls? Who said we're not going to cover fraud today? We're not going to cover the empty daycares that are all over the city. No, we're not going to talk about that. And why? Were they sitting in a cigar lounge together discussing with their cronies and colluding and conspiring to bury the coverage? I mean, these are all questions that are certainly on the table and must be asked. Let's go to the GOP majority whip right now.
If you just, as I said on Monday, good riddance to Governor Walz, but he cannot escape accountability for the estimated $9 billion in fraud. How did this happen? And where the hell has the Twin Cities media been? The Star Tribune is complicit. They have had this story for years, if you just heard, and they've refused to report anything on it. In fact, they continue to try and cover up. Our Minnesota Republican colleagues have demanded answers and accountability for years, but have seen nothing from Walz, his administration, our Democrat colleagues like Tina Smith, Amy Klobuchar, Ilhan Omar, and Angie Craig, or the worthless Star Tribune. Thank God for President Donald J. Trump for finally bringing attention to this issue. As I said on Monday.
So I'm not the only one who believes it. They're all in on the take, every single one of them. Let's go to Secretary Noem on Fox with Jesse Waters.
So many Minnesota state employees were saying, Governor Walz, pay attention to this. People are stealing the money. These are not legitimate businesses. They are not legitimate nonprofits. And he ignored them. He told them to do their job and just follow orders and exactly what he was telling them to do and overlook all of these criminals. And they felt like very much they were whistleblowers who were being ignored or bullied into being quiet. So many Minnesota state employees
bullied into being quiet. That's the other element, the threat element. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison facing scrutiny after a 2021 audio recording resurfaced in which he vowed support for a group that included now convicted Somali fraud defendants. Alex McAdams TV. This is Fox and Friends reporting this just 14 hours ago.
Of people so as we know here in Minneapolis, the investigation into these fraud allegations is far from over. But sources are telling Fox again this morning that now that Governor Tim Walz says he's not going to run for re-election, the feds are also shifting their focus to the state's Attorney General, Keith Ellison. Why? Because a newly obtained clip by Fox that we just got yesterday that was from 2021 has Ellison meeting in this recording with a group of people who were asking for his help. The problem is those people, you guys, were then just days later arrested for one of the biggest fraud scandals in the state. Watch.
The only way we can protect what we have is by inserting ourselves into the political arena, putting our votes where it needs to be, but most importantly, putting our dollars in the right place and supporting candidates that will fight to protect our interests.
That's right.
You can only protect our interests when we have your back, and you don't have to worry about who's behind you.
So now officials are saying, why was Ellison meeting with this group?
That's exactly the way it works. I'm going to play that recording back again, but listen very carefully. What I just laid out earlier is exactly the scenario that's playing out. We will keep the money flowing. We will vote for you. Listen to the messaging in that recording again.
Fraud scandals in the state. Watch.
The only way we can protect what we have is by inserting ourselves into the political arena, putting our votes where it needs to be, but most importantly, putting our dollars in the right place and support.
Do you hear that? That's code. The only way we can protect what we have is by inserting ourselves in the political arena, putting our votes where it needs to be, most importantly, putting our dollars in the right place and supporting candidates that will fight to protect our interests. The interests are fraud. Okay? To protect what we have, that is the racket. To protect the racket, we have to insert ourselves into the political arena. And to protect the racket, we need to put our votes where it needs to be with candidates who are willing to also protect the racket, and most importantly, putting our dollars in the right place, donating to the campaigns who will protect the racket, and supporting candidates who will fight to protect our interests. Ellison, that's right. You can only protect our interests when we have your back, and you don't have to worry about who is behind you. Oh my God. You can only protect our interests when we have your back. Holy cow. If there was ever a smoking gun recording, there it is. That was recorded December 11th, 2021, obtained by attorney Kenneth Udebok. Holy cow.
Supporting candidates that will fight to protect our interests.
That's right.
You can only protect our interests when we have your back, and you don't have to worry about who's behind you.
So now officials are saying, why was Ellison meeting with this group in the first place? They were asking him to help them get more federal funding.
And then they all get arrested days later. I guess the votes and the money didn't come soon enough.
Offering votes and campaign donations for support. So the audio clip's part of an ongoing investigation into the widespread fraud across the state.
Holy
Ellison's
cow.
office sharing an op-ed that he wrote in the local paper. He said, in part, I took a meeting in good faith with people I didn't know, and some turned out to have done bad things. I did nothing for them and took nothing from them. But documents obtained by the Center for the American Experiment say some of those non-convicted Somali fraudsters that he met with donated money to Ellison's campaign after that meeting. It's money, though, he did later give back once this group was indicted, according to reports. So there's just so many levels.
But if they weren't indicted, what happened? Would he have just kept the money? You see, they got caught. Now the money's dirty. Gives it back. Oh, I gave the money back. But imagine if they were never caught. You see how the game works?
Of this fraud that's been going on for years, according to officials. Fox obtained that full, nearly 1 hour long clip of the meeting with the lawyer of Amy Bach. For people wondering who that is there on your screen, she's the Minnesota woman who was one of many convicted last year in that $250 million Feeding Our Future scam. That's how this all started with Bach. She's behind bars, though, but her legal team tells me, where's the accountability for the governor and the attorney general? He said the state let the fraud happen. Do you think some of these policies...
Where's the accountability? Did you hear that?
She's the Minnesota woman who was one of many convicted last year in that $250 million Feeding Our Future scam. That's how this all started with Bach. She's behind bars, though, but her legal team tells me, where's the accountability for the governor and the attorney general?
Where's the accountability for the governor and the attorney general? Well, accountability is coming. Kristi Noem declared it. President Trump delivering it.
Said the state let the fraud happen. Do you think some of these politicians should be held accountable?
I would like to see someone in the state, I don't care whether it's the governor, I don't care whether it's the attorney general, someone take responsibility.
And when you talk to these officials,
and look who's on your screen. Who should take responsibility? Walz, Ellison, Ilhan Omar. Come on, guys. You can say it.
Governor Tim Walz and AG Ellison, they say they've been fighting fraud in Minnesota for years. But the legal team here says Walz and Ellison did not fire or charge a single government employee in connection to this massive scandal that happened on their watch. Walz is not running for re-election, but the White House says that's not going to stop them from investigating him. President Trump says he was caught, quote, red-handed for his role in the fraudulent Somali scams plaguing Minnesota for years. Here's Walz.
We'll make sure that in this state, there's full accountability for everybody, because buck stops with me. I'm accountable for this. And because of that accountability, I'm not running for office again. But I have a year to continue to improve on a record that
Wait a minute. Did he just say he's accountable? He's accountable. And so, therefore, I'm not going to run for office. Okay, so basically you're just admitting guilt? You're holding yourself accountable? What about the criminality behind it all? I want to hear that again.
Him. President Trump says he was caught, quote, red-handed for his role in the fraudulent Somali scams plaguing Minnesota for years. Here's Walz.
We'll make sure that in this state, there's full accountability for everybody, because buck stops with me. I'm accountable.
The buck stops with me. I'm accountable
for this. And because of that accountability, I'm not running for office again.
Because of that accountability, I'm not running for office again. It almost feels like he knows that it's getting closer and closer. And he's just going to say, I'm going to fall on my sword. I'm going to drop out of my campaign. But that's not the end of it, sir. That's only the beginning.
But I have a year to continue to improve on a record that I think will stand up against anybody's, a record that has made Minnesota better, a record that makes people want to come here, and a record that has respected not only the dignity of people, but the idea of rule of law and camaraderie. I'm not going anywhere. And you can make all your requests for me to resign over my dead body. Will that happen? I will fight this thing till the very end to make this state better. And the question that I think they need to decide is when did the guy in the White House resign?
So as we know here,
he says he's got a year, 1 year runway to make things better, to prove his value to the people of Minnesota. Well, I'll tell you this, my friends. Over the course of the next year, this is going to hang like an albatross around his neck until he drowns. Until he is forced to resign. Because, like I said, this is only the beginning. We all know this is just the tip of the iceberg. The investigations are only beginning. You heard Dr. Oz at the beginning. The audits are beginning. You heard the press secretary say, all hands on deck. Every agency has their guns trained on Minnesota. And with that much firepower trained in one central location, this guy, Walz, doesn't stand a chance for a year. Because there is no man on planet Earth that can endure that kind of firepower for a prolonged engagement at the last year of his administration. Well, I take that back. There is actually only one person. The only person that can sustain that kind of that firepower from every single angle and emerge victorious is President Trump. That man survived every single attack that these people have thrown at him since he came down that escalator. to the point of assassination attempts that were foiled by the archangel of heaven. Tim Walz does not afford that kind of protection. Donald Trump is protected by the Almighty. Tim Walz has no such protection. Because when the angels of light go against the angels of dark, they must flee. That is how it operates. That is how the spiritual world operates. And we have forces of darkness versus forces of light. And we know how this book ends. See, that's really what's at stake here. The spiritual battlefield being waged before us in the flesh of men. The difference here is that President Trump has been anointed and appointed by the American people and by the Almighty to root out the darkness in this nation. And there will be no weapon formed against President Trump or his agenda that will stand a chance. Because the darkness that envelops Walz and his people will be destroyed when the beam of light comes down. And the beam of light will be in the form of those audits, will be in the form of those investigations. Because now is the time for darkness to be destroyed. Once and for all. We have prayed for deliverance in this nation. We have prayed. And it is now happening. When Nick Shirley raised his camera and knocked on the Leering Center in Minneapolis, that is when the dam broke. And all bets are off. So if Governor Walz thinks he's going to survive the next year in his administration before he has to be forced to resign, he's got another thing coming. Because it's either resignation or handcuffs. What does Tom Homan have to say?
It's just come as no. Well, first of all, the operation, I'm extremely happy. And this just come as no surprise to the American people. You and I spoke months ago. I made a promise that we will flood the zone of every sanctuary city in this country as bringing thousands of more agents, 10,000 more agents because of the big, beautiful bill. Why Minneapolis? Why are they being prioritized right now? Because billions of dollars fraud has been uncovered. And what they need to be concerned with, Tim Walz says he's not going anywhere. Well, either am I. Either is President Trump. Either is Pam Bondi. Either is Kristi Noem. So we're there because of the priority census, right? But that show is going on the road. So if the Democrats are having a fit now, you better get counseling, because this is about to get a hell of a lot bigger throughout this nation. That show is going on the road. I actually think Minneapolis is the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to find a hell of a lot more in Illinois, New York, California. We'll see. But this operation will go nationwide. We're going to keep our promise. And because President Trump is sitting in the Oval Office, every American can put their head on the pillow tonight, knowing the Border Patrol is on that border, stopping all threats coming across the most secure border in history of this nation. ICE agents and FBI agents are working 24/7, 365, every hour of every day, taking public safety threats and national security threats off our streets. Sleep well, America, because we're keeping America safer. So we're doing exactly in Minnesota what we're going to do nationwide, which you and I talked about, Sean. We're keeping President Trump's promise to American people to make this country safe again, one city at a time, one criminal alien at a time. But first of all,
Oh, yeah. Everyone knows it. The tip of the iceberg. Let's go to House Oversight Chairman, Committee Chair James Comer on the rampant fraud.
Services, which our Oversight Committee is holding its first hearing on the massive fraud in Minnesota's social services program. Minnesota social services, which are funded by you, the American taxpayer, are being ripped off. The most vulnerable are suffering as a result. Federal prosecutors estimate that these criminals have stolen at least $9 billion.
Okay, now I want to pause here. There's a reason. Because this committee holds subpoena power. Do you remember when Pritzker was forced to testify in committee? When Mayor Brandon Johnson had to go before committee? When Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, had to go in front of the committee for their own problems with relation to immigration. This is a different story, but the power remains in the hands of the committee. So mark my words, there will be a moment when the camera flips from James Comer to Governor Walz sitting in the hot seat. Not as a candidate, but as an embattled governor. Not as the would-be vice president of the United States, but as a man on trial in committee, having to answer to the fraud, having to answer to why you oppressed the whistleblowers. So what you're seeing here is another piece of history unfolding in this case. Because what Comer is about to unfold with this new committee investigation is going to be game-changing. Because it will uncover the waterfall, the avalanche of fraud across the country. Because it starts with Minnesota, all these other investigations, they know what's happening everywhere else, and then pretty soon you're going to see all those governors yet again in front of Comer having to testify to the fraud that's occurring in their state. That's when accountability happens. That's when the criminal referrals are handed to the FBI and the Department of Justice. And in past, we've seen those criminal referrals fall into a black hole. And that's because when the game is there, it's protecting itself. But we have a different scenario now. We have a commander-in-chief and we have an administration that is actually willing to do something about it. Let's continue.
The fraudsters, many of whom are from Minnesota's Somali community, have stolen from programs meant to feed needy kids, provide services to autistic children, house low-income and disabled Americans, and provide health care to vulnerable Medicaid recipients. Fraudsters like these take millions to enrich themselves while providing nothing, overstating or outright faking the services. How many children have gone hungry because fraudsters stole money that was intended to provide them with food?
There you go. You care about the children? You care about feeding the children? All that money could have actually gone to feed children. Instead, they're buying BMWs. And they're parking them in the parking lots of daycare centers that are empty. The Leering Center. So when a leftist, Democrat, progressive, whatever they want to call themselves, says, we got to support the children. What about the children? Well, what about those children? What about the ones that never reached, that money never reached, right?
How many autistic children were denied services because fraudsters instead sent this money overseas? How many low-income seniors, people with disabilities, or those with mental illnesses were denied access to housing because fraudsters drained resources and pocketed the money for themselves? The breadth and depth of this fraud is breathtaking. And I fear that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Oversight Committee is holding its...
That's the word of the day. Tip of the iceberg. Everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. ICE stages big Twin Cities operation. DOJ surging prosecutors to Minnesota to bring fraudsters to justice. Bondi vows severe consequences for those convicted. The headline on the New York Post, Right there. DOJ. Consequences. The Justice Department surging prosecutors to fraud-plagued Minnesota in an effort to crack down on criminals robbing American taxpayers. Only the beginning. And there is no time to turn the Titanic because they're barreling right down on it. And that iceberg is about to sink every one of them. You see, Kristi Noem, she delivered the message every fraudster in America needed to hear. If you think you can come to this country and get rich defrauding the American people, think again. They will root out every case from Minneapolis to California to New York. Americans deserve justice.
$1 billion.
Americans deserve accountability. Under President Trump, they will finally get it. Congressman Tom Emmer asked the question everybody wants answered. Where has the Twin Cities media been? They had the story for years and they buried it. Thank God for President Trump for bringing to attention what has been hidden in plain sight. Thank God for Nick Shirley for having the courage to hold his cell phone up. See, what is unfolding in Minnesota right now is bigger than fraud. It is the exposure of an entire system designed to protect criminals at the expense of American taxpayers. For years, the whistleblowers warned. State employees raised alarms. The people in charge, the governor, the attorney general, Ilhan Omar, the media, they did nothing. Worse than nothing. They attacked anyone who asked questions. They called investigators conspiracy theorists. They let billions vanish into shell companies and phantom nonprofits. Well, guess what? That era is over. The Trump administration is not asking permission. They're surging prosecutors, deploying federal assets, and promising severe consequences. Minnesota is the opening salvo and is not the final act. The reckoning is going to continue to build. So the question for you, should Tim Walz face criminal investigation for ignoring the fraud warnings? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments and support independent journalism by checking out the Next News merch shop in the description.
The system controls information. Information control is power.
They don't want you to see this.
The truth only survives together. They don't want this. Share this now.